Mentors, and this webinar we're going to be focusing on avoiding common contract mistakes and how to properly count and recount contract days. This is a common problem that we have that I've seen with some new agents, and this should be a good webinar just to reiterate how to keep track of those days. So there are some primary contract days that you as a new agent and some seasoned agents too that need to be monitoring at all times during the life of the transaction. These are just primary. There's some additional dates that you need to monitor as well, but these are primary ones. The delivery of the option money, and we'll talk a little bit about the option period, to the listing agent or seller within the 3 days. That's per the contract. Another one is the delivery of the earnest money to the title company, again within 3 days. And keeping track of the option period timeline as well. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that. And the third-party financing addendum. And then, of course, payday, which is the scheduled closing date. Again, these are just primary contract days that I'll be focusing on. But there are other dates that you need to watch out for, like the delivery of a survey or the HOA information. So one thing that in my experience that I always try to do is envision the timeline, and this is what would be very helpful for you guys when you're managing your transactions and monitoring them, is to keep track of the entire timeline of the transaction. This timeline I have was 45 days, and this is if you're using a mortgage loan, if the buyers are using a mortgage loan. But the timeline would be shorter if it's a cash deal. Typically, cash deals are 30 days max, but they could be 3 weeks. Again, you have to envision the timeline. And the way I list the timeline is I have day 0, and then which is the executed contract date, and then followed by day 10 for inspections, day 21 for financing, and day 45 for the closing. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the delivery of the earnest money to the title company. Now here's an excerpt of the contract, and hopefully everyone can see that. I can just zoom in a little bit more. And this is found on page 1. So in paragraph 5, the earnest money, it says within 3 days after the effective date, buyer must deliver, for example, here I have $2,245 as earnest money to the title company. It's saying here after the effective date. It doesn't say, prior to the, from the effective date. It's after the effective date. So you got to keep that in mind. These are calendar days, not business days. I get that's a very common question that I always receive from new agents is, oh, do I count Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays? And yes, the answer is yes. Okay. The other timeline that you have to keep track of is delivery of the option money to the listing agent and seller within 3 days after the effective date. So again, this is the delivery of the option. We'll talk a little bit about that. But here's the paragraph where it's paragraph 23, and it talks about the termination of option. Okay, so if you had a timeline and envision this as a visual aspect of it, day 0, and we're going to use today as an executed date, May 2nd. Is the contract executed date. So you don't count that as day 0. You don't count that as day 1. You count that as day 0. Okay, and then you add you do day 1, which is tomorrow, and then so on and so forth. So you have until May 5th to deliver those 2 checks to the appropriate. Either the earnest money goes to the title and the option goes to the listing agent. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the option period. The Paragraph 23 is a very important process because it's a contract within a contract. Okay. I would advise you never to leave it blank. This is a way of the buyers being able to get out of the contract if for some reason there's an issue, particularly with home inspections that they conduct. But here, the termination option, again, is a contract, a mini contract within the contract. It's stating here that the buyer will deliver to the seller, for example, $150 within 3 days after the effective date of this contract. Again, it's similar. You don't count day zero. You don't count the contract executed date as day one. You count it as day zero. And so, and here it says that the buyer has 10 days, to conduct any kind of inspections. Of course, it doesn't say that, but that's what it's stating. And it expires at 5 p.m. Okay, so this option period actually has a time that it ends. Okay, and if you're wondering what 5 p.m. are they talking about, here it says local time where the property is located. Okay, it's not where you're located or the seller's located. If the seller's located in California, no, we're talking about the property itself. Okay, and here I highlighted if no dollar amount is stated, then or the buyer fails to pay the option fee, then they're not able to have the unrestricted rights to terminate the contract. So if you put a zero as a dollar amount, it still doesn't work. It's better to put $1, just to make it active. Okay, and if the buyer has the option to terminate this contract and receive their earnest money, they will not get the $150 option fee back. They're only going to receive the earnest money if they terminate the contract within 10 days or less. Okay. And usually I like to circle the option fee where it says will be credited. That way the buyers can get it back at closing. Okay. So paragraph 23, like I said, is another timeline that you need to keep track of. And this timeline is so the buyers can conduct inspections, termite inspections, pool inspections, septic tank inspections, well water inspections, inspection of the air condition and heating by a licensed service technician, and so on and so forth. People wonder, why do we choose 10 days? Well, guess what? By the time you schedule a home inspector, and let's just say that they find a roofing problem and then it's raining, like right now it's raining here in Tomball. Well, the roofers can't go up there and check the roof out to determine, the actual problem. They have to wait. So all these things may happen. So it's best to give it a good 10-day span. Okay, so if looking at the timeline then, going back to the timeline, you can now envision that day zero again is the contract executed date, which is May 2nd, using today as the example. And so day 10 would be May 12th. That's when the option period ends at 5 p.m. Okay? So you got to keep track of that. If for some reason you fail and you are asleep at the wheel, there is a possibility that where you go, oh no, it's day 11, it's May 13th, and I forgot to even inform the listing agent, because you're the buyer agent in this example. I forgot to tell the listing agent that we needed some more days, or we didn't finish, or what have you. Too bad. You're probably going to have as damages, potential losing your earnest money if you terminate, or not be able to negotiate anything to do any repairs because it's already beyond the time lapsed. Okay. So another timeline is the third-party financing addendum. Here's where this only applies to buyers that are getting a loan. If it's a cash deal, this is not applicable. But here, there's a section in here, page 2. Well, I think now it's in like way at the bottom of page 1. But it's approval of financing, and it states that if buyer cannot obtain buyer approval, buyer may give written notice to the seller within 21 days. Usually we pick 21 or 22 days. Please do not leave this blank, similar to the option period. I highly suggest never to leave those paragraphs blank, paragraph 23 and this one, because this is another out for the buyer if for some reason there's an issue. In particular, this one is an issue if there's problems with their financing that doesn't look very well, good for them to be approved fully. Keep in mind, we always stress the buyers to get a pre-approval, but that doesn't mean that they're fully approved. Those are two big differences. But here it's, again, 21 days. If you do a timeline, you have, again, day 0, May 2nd, contract executed date, the day 10, May 12, option period ends, and then you continue. Let's just say you're moving forward with the transaction. They're going to do some repairs or what have you. There's some kind of negotiation agreement, and now you got to keep track of day 21, which is May 23rd, is where the third-party financing ends. Now this one doesn't have a 5 o'clock timeline, but just don't wait until the 21st day. Normally what I tell my students is 5 days before May 23rd, for example, or before the 21 days, contact the lender. Usually the buyer will give you permission to contact the lender and say, hey, how's it going, CMG Financial, or hey, how's it going, Beckham, Wells Fargo? Just checking on my buyer, making sure that the financing is looking good. They don't have to give you too many details, particularly if there's any private matters, but they can overall give you it's looking good, or it's not looking good. So that's another timeline. Okay, so the most common thing that always happens, that you will always pretty much encounter a lot of, is buyer needs to extend the days of the option period, or it could be buyers need to extend the days of the third-party financing, or so on and so forth. Oh, by the way, Tracy, can you mute your phone? Because I can hear you coughing. Thank you. So buyer needs to extend days to option period. So reason could be that they need additional inspections. It's been raining for 2 or 3 days, for example, and the roofer hasn't been able to go up there. My understanding is roofers, if it's a 40% chance of rain, they will not go up in the roof. That's what I've heard before. So anyway, but you need more days, and buyers requesting about 5 more days added to the option period. So we're gonna be using this amendment. This amendment is very common. We're always going to use the same amendment document. There is no other amendments that you're going to be using. This is the only amendment you will be using for any kind of changes to the contract. Okay, there is no other amendments, and this amendment is pretty powerful because it encompasses several things. You can change price. You can add repair requests. You can change the contract date. Or move the contract date. You can, do all these other different things, all in the same amendment. And yes, you can select multiple selections at the same time. But in this particular case, we're supposed to add 5 more days, right? Because that's what we're using as a sample for our demo. And so we would select buyer has paid an additional option fee of $1. Remember, I told you that it has to be some kind of monetary value in order for it to be. There are times where they leave it at 0, and as an amendment, I think it's okay, but not the first time when you initiate the contract. So here it's saying buyer has paid seller an additional option fee of $1 for an extension of unrestricted right to terminate on or before 5 p.m. Again, it's reminding you that it ends at 5 p.m. on May 17, 2019. This additional option fee will be credited, meaning that they're going to get their $1 back. And this is the buyer paying the seller $1. So the timeline here then, if you envision it, again, you're always using day 0, May 2nd. But remember, day 10th was the last day, May 12th. So you would add 5 more days. Again, they're calendar days. They're not business days. Plus 5 more. Then that means you're moving the option period to May 17th at 5 o'clock. Okay. If you wanted to do additional changes, like adding more, I mentioned earlier about the financing. The financing, you can also add more. Let's just say the CMG Financial lender is telling you, hey, I know it expires on the 21st or whatever that day was, but we need about 5 more days because we're waiting for the IRS income tax return, or we're waiting for an additional paycheck stub, or whatever it is. Then you can extend it through here, May 20, and you have to ask the lender about how many more days, and they can tell you, well, about 5 days. Now, the lenders don't work on the weekends. Some of them do, but some of them don't. And so there, you're going to have to kind of make a judgment. Like if you say May 27th and it falls on a Sunday, well, guess what? The lender doesn't work that day. So go ahead and put like May 28th, for example, if that's a Monday, just to give the lender a chance to work during their business hours. As realtors, we work as through calendar days, and as a lender, they work through business days. Okay. So, some helpful tips, and these are pretty important. These are contract days are counted as calendar days and not business days. So remove that from your mind, your mindset. Saturday and Sunday and holidays are not exempt. They are still counted as calendar days. If the contract days happen to be during a flood or a hurricane or a natural disaster, these days are not exempt. The contract does not stop. If you're in an emergency room, these days are not exempt. And my example here is, let's just say you have to, and this actually happened to one of my students. She had to drop off the option check to the listing agent, and she had to go to the emergency room. Okay, so she contacted me and she goes, "Hey, I'm on my way to the emergency room. I'm in a lot of pain, and I have this option check with me. What can I do?" I said, "Well, you still have to drop it off to the listing agent." "But I'm on my way to the emergency room." I go, "I know, but you still have to drop it off. It doesn't stop." And today was the last day, that day was the last day to deliver it. So I said, "Hey, can you call someone, maybe a family member, a friend, to pick it up and take it?" So I said, "You can also contact the listing agent and see if you can work something out." So she contacted the listing agent, and the listing agent actually was a nice guy. He actually drove to meet her at the emergency room, and she was able to hand over the check to him at the emergency room. So just keep in mind that it doesn't stop. We strongly suggest you hand deliver the option check. Do not mail it. Okay. Well, people ask, well, how come we can't mail it? Well, what if it gets lost in the mail? You don't have an option period. It becomes invalid. Your buyers cannot terminate the contract. Well, I mean, they can terminate the contract, but there's no option period because the check was never delivered. Okay, so I advise you never to mail the check. Sometimes the listing agents will say, "Oh, just drop it off at the title company when you drop off the earnest money." No. I have to deliver it to you or your office or the seller. Okay. Make sure you keep track of all important dates from within all the contract addendums. Besides the 1014 contract, there are other timelines to watch out for. There's the HOAs and delivery of the surveys. There's seller's disclosures. Keep track of when the other dates end, like the third-party financing and closing date. Keep in mind that, like when I gave you that example about adding 5 more days to the option period, well, you also got to keep in mind will that push the other days, 5 days as well? Would it push the third-party financing days? Would it push the closing date? And this is real critical, and you got to keep that in mind. Yeah, it's easy to add 5 days to the option period, or to the financing, but would it push the closing date? So always you got to see that entire timeline. Okay. Uh, Another thing that's really, really critical is the seller may not accept your request to extend a date at all. They can say, no, I don't want to give you 5 more days of option period. Now you can say, hey, how about if I give you another $150 or $300 or $250 to extend the option period? But they still may say no. And some of my students sometimes ask me, well, why, Fernando? Why do you think they say no? Or they might say no. Because they probably have another offer that's better. And they're waiting for you to fail or your buyers to fail and terminate. And your buyer has a very, very conscious decision. They either have to terminate or they're going to move forward with it like being in a casino and wondering if they're going to, be approved or, moving forward. But this may jeopardize their earnest money. And it's up to them, not you. You cannot give them any advice. If they're not sure, they can contact their attorney, a real estate attorney, on what they should do. There's only one amendment that we use, the TAR 1903. There is no other amendments. You can use it and reuse the same amendment document, and of course you have to change the data for all your extensions or any other applicable thing that you have to do. Amendments are signed by both seller and buyer. Now, an example of the option period is there might be a situation where it's already 4 p.m. on a Friday and the option period ends at 5 p.m. And you remember Fernando telling you in a webinar, you got to have everything before, well, I might have not mentioned this, but you have to have everything in agreement before 5 o'clock. And what I mean by that, the amendment has to be executed and signed before 5 o'clock. Okay. So don't wait until the last minute. Okay. And another thing that a common question that I always get is, it says that broker executes this amendment. Well, the broker's giving you permission to put a date, put a broker date. I mean, to put a date of an executed date on that amendment. So you are authorized to do that. Okay. All righty. So I'm pretty much done. I'm ready for some questions, guys. I'm going to look at the time. Oh, here's a. So just to kind of reiterate, just have this vision of the typical timeline that you're keeping track of. Yes, I think I hear somebody talking.
Yeah, it's David.
Yes, sir. What can I help you with?
I haven't actually looked at this TAR amendment, but it has to be notarized?
The amendment, no. The amendment does not have to be notarized. Just signed by buyer and seller, and then either the listing agent or the buyer agent puts in on the executed date. That's it. It's because you're still within contract. You're within the contract. Okay. Any other questions? So keep in mind, calendar days only, not business days. Any questions on the option period? Does everybody understand the importance of that? Because this one tends to kind of confuse people. One question that I get asked a lot is, What if they don't want an option period? Well, you leave it blank, and then you tell them, I highly recommend you having an option period so you can conduct any inspections you want. But I don't want an inspection. My dad's a handyman. My brother's a handyman, and the house looks good to me, and all this other stuff they tell you. You can say, well, but you haven't looked under the hood. Kind of like a car. When you're buying a car, you need to open the hood up. You have no idea about the air condition and the termite, if there's any termites, or the water heater, or the electrical, or the plumbing, roofing, foundation. There's all these other things that you can, have to check for. And also you got to do other inspections too for pools and septic tanks and well waters. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to do. But if the buyer still refuses, then okay, just say all right. And then we have another form that says that they're not going to do any home inspections that they have to sign. Okay. Anybody have any questions before we wrap it up?
Do you know what the number is? Is that a TAR form?
Yeah. It's TAR 1903.
No, the other one, when they're not going to do the inspections. Is it the same form?
Oh, that one is it's called inspection form, and let me see. It's inspector information TAR 2506. So that's the form that you use. There's two check boxes. One says will be conducting inspection, and the other one says will not be conducting inspections. And I usually have my clients poke their finger, so like that blood comes out, and then sign it if it's going to be they will not conduct inspections. I want their DNA on that form, because they're going to come back to you in 2 years going, Fernando, remember you sold us a house 2 years ago? Well, the air condition broke. How come you didn't force us to conduct an inspection? Because here's the form that says that you refused to do an inspection, and you signed it with your blood. Oh, so that means I can't sue you, right? Well, probably not. You can try. Okay.
If they file a complaint with TREC, I guess you could just show them the form.
Exactly, because the form will cover that, especially if they sign it with blood, because they can test the DNA. Of course, I'm just joking. Okay. Well, I hope this was helpful. I hope you understand about calendar days and where they fit in the contract, and adding days and all that good stuff. You're going to be doing this a lot.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How many days are you allowed to extend the option period?
Well, it depends on, like, for example, let me give you an example. Right now it's raining, okay? And let's just say that the roofer needs to go, but the roofer tells you, okay, I heard that it's not going to rain on Saturday. And you go, okay. So let's just say that it's for sure that it's going to happen on Saturday, that the roofer's going to go. Well, then you need about 1 or 2 more days to review the report from the roofer. So the way I calculate things is I find out when all the inspections are going to be completed, and then I'll add like 2 more days. So like that we have time so the buyer has time to review it and then decide, are they going to ask the sellers to fix things, or to ask for money towards closing costs in lieu of repairs. And I kind of like to give them a day so they can, do their own review. So it's all just a judgment, depending on the schedule. Yeah. I hope that answers kind of your question.
Yeah.
This is David again. That reminded me of something. We had a disaster like Harvey come in. Doesn't that really throw a wrench in everything?
Yes. or even if it's just a hurricane or flooding or whatever. Um, it those situations, and in my experience, the listing agent and the buyer agent tend to be like, "Hey guys, we can't do anything." Like for example, especially during bad weather, there's not even electricity, right? Let's just assume. Well, there can't be you can't conduct an inspection without electricity. So nothing can happen. So pretty much in those situations, we tend to always extend the option period with $0. So I haven't ever been like in an experience where the seller refuses to extend it because of rain. I mean, because there was that. So, but yeah, and Hurricane Harvey hopefully doesn't happen until 100 years from now. Another one. Okay. And another thing is some sellers don't want to change the closing date, which is paragraph 9 on the amendment. They can say no, and you're stuck, because that's one thing you need to really keep track of is don't shortchange yourself when you're putting a closing date. I always tell my students, make sure there are 45 days, not business days, but 45 calendar days. And if you're submitting an offer, and let's just say you're submitting an offer today, don't count tomorrow as day 0, because you don't know if it's going to be signed. It might take 2 days to sign something to make it executable. So kind of keep that in mind when you're submitting an offer. Cushion the 45 days, maybe do 47, because the seller may be going back and forth and then counter offers here and there, or they don't agree with this and you don't agree with that. So there's probably 2 days wasted. And if you shortchange yourself and you start at 45 days like tomorrow, counting as day 0, and let's just say it takes 2 days, you already lost 2 days. Then, so now it's not 45 days, now it's 43. And let's just say that on the 43rd day, you needed 2 more days. For some reason, the lender says, hey, we're almost done. We need one last paycheck stub, or we need this, or we need that, or we need I don't know, something happens. And we just need 2 more days. Can you extend it for 2 more days? Well, you're thinking, yeah, no big deal. Because in your mind, it was 43 days, right? Yeah, but the seller's like, no, you said, by this date. And the seller can refuse to extend it and not accept it. So, and usually when in that situation, I'm always thinking that they probably have another offer in the table that's probably cash and can probably close in 3 weeks. And yours is a loan. Who knows? We never know. I'm just second guessing. Okay. Well, I hope this was helpful. And hopefully when you're out there, you can kind of remember these rules and helpful tips. Okay, if there's any other questions, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando.